Hello, my name is Daniel Foreman. I am 34 years old and I have been an agoraphobic for about 11 years. It started in 2003 when I had what can only be described as a mental breakdown of epic proportions. And it was and at the time I was so bad that when doctors and family and all that came round, I could barely even speak to them. I couldn't really be in the same room as people without hanging onto door frames and looking terrified, and sort of feeling intense anxiety all the time. Now, over the last 10 years, that has slowly begun to dissipate, and I have slowly gotten a control of that. It could have been much faster, I have to admit to myself. Simply, they did offer me various medications and all that kind of stuff, but part of my overall fear spectrum, as I like to call it, is that I was also terrified of taking pills. I mean, it was years and years. I've got a broken tooth, and I would refuse to take any kind of medication for it if I could possibly avoid it. I would rather be there in pain rather than risk taking something as simple as an ibuprofen. So this was all part of my anxiety issues. It wasn't until my face actually swelled up to about twice the size that I finally took ibuprofen. That brought the swelling right down and I was fine. And since then I've been able to take that sort of thing. So I've been a complex mess of anxieties and social, basically just anxieties, full stop. And it would take very little to trigger a full-blown panic attack. And when all this started, I was in such a bad state that I could barely walk from the end of my corridor to my bathroom without my heart physically pounding. I would spend most of the day in bed just lying down in almost a completely disorientated state. And it would take so much effort just to sit up for 4 hours at a time, and this is what I was like on my own. And there's no one around here because people around me cause me issues. I did have family to help me, but around about the same time, unfortunately, my father contracted cancer. So naturally, the family's focus was on him, and quite frankly, just didn't know what to do with me. Because who does? I mean, agoraphobic. It's not physical. It's all up here. But I started making improvements and strides in 2007 when I managed to land a job with a game tool making company, and I provided technical support. I had basically been, one of the things I used to distract myself, because I've always been good with PCs and technology and all that kind of stuff. So I basically sat down and I taught myself a programming language. And with this company who produced the programming language, one day put up a message on their forums saying we're looking for someone to do technical support. I had a background in technical support and customer service with call centres and things. So I applied and I got the job. And first of all, it's just a few side jobs here and there. Then they gave me a rolling contract. And they've been paying me since 2007 just to do their support work, and that was probably the first step in my slow recovery. Now, I'm not fully recovered now. I'm not going to claim that. However, tonight's success is very, very encouraging, and this is the first success, bear in mind, that I've had in 11 years. I will tell you about that in a moment. But basically, I want to paint a picture of exactly what it's taken for me to get to this point, because apart from anything else, if you're agoraphobic and you're watching this, you might learn something from my successes so far. Now, again, I haven't completely cured this yet. I haven't sort of gone out for days at a time or a long time, been away from home, or even very far away from home. But the point is that I'm now starting to become mobile. Anyway, so basically, once I got that job, that was the first step to self-esteem, and it was so difficult getting that job and being able to. Well, it took so much courage at the time just to do the job, because I hadn't worked for 6 years. I knew what I was, and I was somewhat volatile emotionally, so keeping my mind under control long enough to actually write sensible responses to technical support without, ruining the company in the first place was a real challenge, because I was prone to ranting and all sorts of things. I was a horrible person in many ways, and I used to spend a lot of time in chat rooms just being not very nice, because I was hurting, and that's what happens when you hurt. You lash out at people. And because there's no one around here to do that, I just did it online. Anyway, so that was my first success with that company, and then I went on to write my first novel. Now, I've always been a writer. I've been writing for years. I've been working on a series for the last, well, since even before I became in the States, since about 19. I was on a bus one day and I just had a sort of vision on a hot summer's day of an ending for a book, and I've been sort of working to that ever since, and I've sort of expanded into other projects. So I haven't been idle. I've been learning how to write, I've been learning how to program, I've been doing all sorts of things, just learning lots of random things, trying to keep myself as occupied as possible. And with every little success, a little bit of self-confidence came along. Now, over the last 3 years, I managed to lose considerable weight, because I am incredibly heavy now. I'm still 25 stone, but I was up to 28 at one point, possibly up to 29 even. I didn't have working scales at that point, but it was entirely possible I was in that ballpark. But over the last few years, my weight has been dropping off, which is generally a sign of the improvement in my mental state in the first place. The fact that I've been eating less, comfort eating less. Actually, one of the things I discovered was the way I was eating was one of the contributing factors to my anxiety. And once I started getting that under control and started eating proper vegetables and getting a decent diet, that improved my mental state considerably, and slowly my anxiety began to drop down, because every time I'd feel my heart pounding, it would trigger anxiety. And of course, when you feel anxiety, your heart pounds. It just became this sort of cycle. And that would just go on for days and days and days, and I might get a minor break, but then it would all happen again. And I was just in that state all the time, trying to do things while feeling my own body, pumping away blood. And you're not supposed to feel it, because I know now that, I just talk and I do things and I don't feel my heart. But back then, I just felt it all the time, almost 24 hours a day. It got to the point where I wasn't sleeping well enough, simply because I was lying there and I could just hear my own heart. So that was a constant flow of adrenaline in my system, which I slowly came to realise. But back then, I didn't understand any of it. It was terrifying. Because honestly, every time you have a really bad panic attack, you are honestly convinced you are going to die. That's what it feels like, and you imagine all sorts of things, like you've got brain cancer and heart problems and all this kind of stuff. You're getting palpitations, and because I was so terrified of people, I never went to get help. I couldn't go to the hospital. I couldn't go to the doctors would come here occasionally, but when they came here, I was so uncommunicative that I couldn't really say exactly what was going on. And as you can tell now, I'm actually a pretty well-spoken person. I always have been. It's just that I was in such a state of anxiety whenever people came along that I just couldn't say anything, and that was how it was. Sorry, just checking that the camera's still running. The timer vanished. Sitting here talking to myself. Anyway, so yeah, the camera is still running, I think. Yep. Yes, okay, sorry. So anyway, that all happened. Then in, I think, 2009, I managed to write and publish my own fiction novel, which was called Depth's Awakening. Now, I've pulled that down from sale, A, because it was rubbish. First attempt is going to be, it was self-published. A lot of spelling mistakes, he's just terrible, basically. I think I sold all of 2 copies. But the fact is, that was the first time I had taken a book and gone from the beginning to the end and completed it. So this was a big milestone for me, even though other people might think, oh well, you completed something. But for me, I would flit around between projects. I would start a game, I would start this, I would start that. I would never ever see anything all the way through, except for one series of books that I was having in mind. I've been working on that for about 11 years now, and this was the first in that book. Now, I've since scrapped what I wrote originally, and I've gone all the way back to the beginning. I've started rewriting again. I've also started writing a children's book, which is kind of based on, well, it's influenced by Narnia and the Dark Materials trilogy, Northern Lights and all those, plus my own views of physics and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it's not finished yet. But the point is that these are the projects I'm kind of engaging in, and by engaging my brain with these things, and even taking myself out of reality in such a way that I could actually work, I slowly began to improve. So that was my first success. Then a couple of years ago, I published another book. No, before that, I published some font packs for a game engine. So that was the first commercially selling product I produced, and has been producing a reoccurring revenue ever since. So that was my first real success. The fact that I'd just seen that all the way through. And it was actually selling, and people liked it, and they wanted more. So I made 3 of these packs in the end, and they're still selling. So they don't make a lot, but the fact that I'm selling 3 or 4 or 5 a month is, a big self-esteem boost. And someone who's just been sitting here not doing much for the last 10 years. And then after that, I put the knowledge I'd learned from the programming language into a book. And I wrote, and it's called Teach Yourself Game Programming for Android and Windows. Now, I'm not going to tell you it's the best book in the world. It was my first one. My first programming book rather than my first fiction book. And but people have given me good comments on it. They haven't sort of slammed me for it or said this is horrible. It's been a good seller. It's sold thousands of copies actually, and I've made a decent amount of money from it. And then another bloke found this book, and he was desperate to produce a game making course for K-12 schools and post-secondary education. So not only am I a self-published writer with a book that is actually selling, but now I'm involved in this huge scale project where there's hundreds of videos, there's tutorials, there's exams, and this gets you a proper qualification. So I've gone from writing a small little EPUB book to actually producing online game making courses that are being actively taught in schools, and students are actually getting certifications from all this. And this is all because over the last 11 years, I've in a very unique way, I haven't studied or anything, I've just experimented and learned about things at my own pace. And it's given me an ability to kind of explain things in a way that probably more technical people don't, because they haven't gone through that sort of amateurish way of learning. Now, my way may not be the best way, but all the feedback we've got so far has been great. And it's this kind of thing that's really sort of built up my self-esteem. And then 3 weeks ago, so this is going all the way up to now. 3 weeks ago, I met a girl online called Alex, and it's not a romantic thing. I've had relationships on chat, and they've never worked very well because, again, I was anxious and I couldn't even meet them. So, they were never going to work. I haven't had an actual relationship in over 11 years. Probably 13 now actually, because my problems preceded my anxiety way before that. But anyway, I met her, and she's just been nice. She's been encouraging. She said all the right things. She's been patient with me, and we've become good friends in just a few weeks. And with her encouragement, I decided I wanted to improve further. Because she gave me a taste of what life could be, with company and friends and all that kind of stuff, and I've decided I want to try and get all that. But anyway, thanks to all this, thanks to all these successes that have happened over a period of years, they haven't been fast, they haven't been sort of, I've done this and this, because anything fast was just too much for me to process. Because all this has happened very gradually over time. Tonight, I was able to go outside I've been able to go into the yard and stargaze for about an hour at a time, and as I've built up these successes, I've been able to spend longer and longer outside in the yard, just stargazing and that kind of thing. Just playing with cats actually. I'll just sit out there with the laser pointers and just watch all the cats run around. It's great fun. It's better than TV. But yeah, I mean the point is that I've slowly been building myself up until tonight, where I managed to go out for the first time. Now, the first time it was hard, and I hit my usual barriers. Now, my first barrier is clenching in the stomach. When there's clenching in the stomach, you're nervous. And at that point, it's very easy to think the wrong thought. And if you think the wrong thought, you go into a spiral, and you start becoming really anxious. Now, by hanging outside, I've started to kind of, well, I obviously have, I've got a grip on how that works, and I've started to twist my thinking in the other direction so I can think positively rather than negatively. You know, this isn't so bad, it's actually quite nice out here. The wind is kind of cool on my face, and just focusing on the nice stuff. Now, there's a little cat around here called Elizabeth, and she is fantastic for laser dots. She will go nuts over it. But the other thing she does is she follows you around. So I managed to make it to the end of the yard, and I managed to make it round to the corner, which I've been able to do. I can stand there and I wave goodbye to my mother as she's left and all that kind of stuff. So this is stuff I've practiced, but I've never really been able to go up to the corner and feel comfortable about going to the corner and then going any further than that. And that's where I'd always stop, because that's where I felt kind of, I mean, when I first had this problem with agoraphobia, it's like I would just go outside and I'd walk and I'd walk and I'd feel fine, and then suddenly it's like you just hit this wall. It feels like a physical sensation. It feels like you've walked into something. The adrenaline kicks in, your legs go steady, all that kind of stuff. So this didn't happen. This hasn't actually happened for a while, to be honest, over a year or so. So obviously I've been at a point where I could kind of move on. I just needed that extra kick from Alex to get me there. And so yeah, I managed to get around the corner. I then went up to the car. Sorry, I managed to make it halfway up the street, and then I hit my second wall. Now the second wall is when I managed to push past the first one. I could feel sort of a general low level of anxiety, and I get to the car, and that was it. I decided that was it. That's as far as I could go. Then I turned back. Now, every time I've turned back, I've always felt terrible, and I've always taken this as an indication that that I'm just panicking, and it wasn't. I'm starting to recognise this feeling as failure. The fact that I was turning around and retracing my step and just going back. I've never really understood what that feeling was before, but having managed to overcome that this evening, yeah, it's simply the fact that I was punishing myself for turning around without realising that's what I was doing. So anyway, I came back, and I have to say that even though she's helped me, I had a real go at her. She didn't say the right things. I didn't say what I wanted to hear, and I was quite nasty, and I sort of went away feeling quite nasty about it. And that in itself was a good thing, because it stopped me thinking about the panicking, going outside, and while it was unpleasant, it was a case of almost a necessary evil. Because it gave me I felt guilty, and that overpowered the feeling of anxiety and problems. And at that point, I almost wanted to make it up by achieving what I set out to go. Because my original goal, and I said this, was I'm going to walk around the block, and that was my goal, just to walk around the block, about 400 metres it is. And I only managed to make it halfway up the street, which is a failure, and I hate failure. I'm beginning to realise this. I hate failing at things. It sends me into a spiral of depression, which I suppose it does for many people, but these are revelations that are new to me. They shouldn't be. I should be more intelligent than this, but I just haven't been that emotionally aware, I suppose. But anyway, almost as a penance to make it up to her, I managed to make it to the car, and I managed to make it beyond. Now, I had a little bit of support at this point, because there is this cat called Elizabeth, and she followed me around like a little puppy dog. And this, I don't know what came over me, because I fully intended, as soon as I got to that car, to just turn right back around and go back home like I always do. But just seeing that little cat dancing around almost joyfully, going under cars and just running around and just glad to sort of follow me around. It's not exactly courage, I just felt the intense urge to just go onwards, and my feet just started moving and moving and moving, and even though I was not painfully aware, but I was aware of the fact that I was moving, the cat was providing just enough distraction to keep me going, and she followed me, And she followed me, and she followed me, and I managed to make it all the way up to the end. I managed to make it down the alley, and I managed to make it down the other street, down the block. Now, I had to stop there because this cat was still following me, and she was just darting in and out of cars. And I was about to go onto a main road with lots of cars, lots of people. It's not bad this time of night, but I just had this sort of image in my head that that she would just dance out into the road and get herself killed, basically. And I didn't want that to happen, so I rang my neighbour's doorbell, and I apologised profusely, and I said, would you mind taking this cat in? So I don't end up killing the poor thing by walking out there. And we sort of had a slightly awkward conversation for me. I mean, she was overjoyed to see me because she knows my condition, and she knows that just getting around to her front door was a big deal, just getting that far. And she very kindly offered at that point to let me through the house and just climb over the back wall rather than have to go down the street. I was very tempted at this point to do this because I've been down her garden a couple of times before, so it's familiar territory almost, and it's not very far from my yard, so I see it all the time. But I declined politely, and she said, you know, you sure, and all that kind of stuff. And she took the cat in and put it out in her back garden and just waited for me there. So I went down to the street, I went up the main road. Now the main road is very brightly lit, there's cars and there's people there. And those are the things I hate. Anything moving around me has always triggered me before and made me go into an anxiety issue. An anxiety moment, or a PD, basically, panic attack. But yeah, I managed to make it up the road without much problem, and I sort of walked back into my yard behind the building, which is nice and quiet, which is lucky for me. And there's a wall that comes up to just under my armpits, and I was so knackered at that point because I hadn't had that much exercise in forever, and I just sort of put my arms over, it was just like and just sort of relaxing on the wall, and she sort of had a little conversation with me. The cat came out again. And I went back inside, and I sat down, and I sort of looked at the computer screen, and I told Alex I'd managed to achieve this, and I sort of rested for a few minutes, and then, purely on a whim, I went out again. So, same route, second time that night, I managed to go out, and actually I was really anxious because the first time I did it without a hat or anything. Now I'll show you my gear. Actually, I'll show you my gear. You can see I'm a bit overweight because I've been sitting on my arse for 10 years. So this is one thing I aim to change with all this. But this is my gear. This is my going out gear now. This is my father's hat. So this is good because it blocks the top of my vision. It's kind of like horse blinkers. In order to stop them panicking, you put blinkers at the side. It just narrows your vision. And the other thing I did to make myself feel secure, and I did this mostly because I have a damaged tooth here. If my face gets too cold, and it's really cold out there at the moment, if my face gets too cold, my tooth starts to hurt, and of course I can't get dentist or anything, so I'll try to avoid that. So in order to try and protect myself from that, I just sort of take my scarf like this. And I'd probably look ridiculous going around the street now, seeing this on camera. And I just sort of put it up to my ears and just cover myself like this. And just sort of walk with my head down, so I'm looking at the ground. I'm holding the scarf up to my nose, so kind of hiding really. I am hiding, I know I'm hiding. But it just makes it easier, the fact that I can just walk down and it just covers your vision, so you're not taking in so much data. And this has always been my problem, is that when I start to feel anxious, I just see everything around me, and this narrows my field to a point where it's manageable. So even if I do look mildly ridiculous, I mean it's winter at the moment, so I can kind of justify it. So I'm just sort of out there with these leather gloves, sort of this thing around. I'm just sort of walking around like this, which again I know it looks ridiculous, but no one looked at me. No one thought it was particularly odd. It was just a man in a hat walking down, trying to keep his face warm. I mean, in winter, what's more natural? So And again, these are the issues that I've faced. I've always felt like every time you go out, because it's social anxiety, I always felt everyone's judging you, everyone's looking at you, but no one cares. And I'm realising this now. I mean, you walk out there, and people will glance at you, might think, "Oh, that's a bit odd," and then they'll just talk about their mates about something else, and you really don't matter. You don't factor in their lives enough for them to actually care. But these are the sort of anxieties that sort of I developed over many years, and I'm only just starting to break them down at 34, which is pretty terrible. But you know, any success is success. So anyway, I managed to go around there, sort of in my gear, and I'm going to be using this gear for a while now, just to keep myself acclimatized, and then maybe remove the scarf one day, and maybe the hat another day. But yeah, I was just going around with this little cat sort of dancing around and all that kind of thing. And she did it the second time. The second time I went out, she followed me around again. I had to do exactly the same thing. I had to go around all the quiet streets. I had to pass a few people, and that's something that's always triggered me again in the past, is just the idea of someone walking past me. It doesn't need any more than that just to trigger anxiety. But that didn't happen. I felt a twinge, but it was a ghost of what I used to feel. And anyway, this again, the cat was there. She was distracting me, and I did exactly the same thing to my neighbour again. And bearing in mind, this is about 11:30 at night, so she's very good not to sort of swear and curse at me. Why are you waking me up this time? But yeah, I asked her to take the cat in and keep her in this time, because I wanted to be able to walk around and not have to ring a doorbell every time I go around, and every time I want to go on the main road and worry about this cat getting itself killed. But she was a little catalyst, just, bravely, and she was exactly like I was in many ways. Every time a car would start coming down the road, she would just freeze. She'd just be like, "There's a car." And then as soon as the car went, it was just like, "Oh, never mind, we'll just carry on." And I related to it. I mean, these are the fear instincts that have been going through me for years. It's just that primal thing of, "Oh no, it's big and it's coming at me," kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, so just watching this little animal confidently sort of watch very warily as it goes past, and then carry on as if nothing's happened, put me in the right mindset. And after this video, I'm gonna go out again. I want to try and make it an even mile now. But anyway, I managed to make it around the block, which is, I calculated this. Oh, this is the thing I did when I came in the first time, or was it the second time? No. After I went around 6 times, I did all the mathematics to calm myself down. I went on Google Maps and I worked out exactly how far I travelled around using, their ruler tool and calculating it all. And it came to 2.3 kilometres I'd walked just tonight. I mean, that is farther than I've walked in a very long time. And I'm a man who doesn't have to move more than 2 feet from his bed to his chair, then move another sort of 2 or 3 metres to his kitchen, maybe another 2 metres to the bathroom, and that's all I walk all day, really. And the fact that I'm still able to get out there and walk 2.5 kilometres with only a little bit of breathlessness, a little bit of tightness in the chest, and again, that's purely because I'm unfit. And my heart rate was elevated, but it didn't trigger an anxiety attack. And I've just been overall successful. So today I have managed to walk 2.5 kilometres. I'm going to go out, try and walk around a couple more times just to practice it and get it in my head that I can feel good about it. And then I'll try again tomorrow and we'll see what happens. But this is day 1 of my slow recovery. I don't feel bad at all. I'm talkative, I'm responsive, I'm not anxious ridden. I was a little bit, but mostly it's because it feels weird coming back into this small place after being out there. And every time I went out, my mind just sort of expands the horizons, if you like. And but yeah, I mean, this is a vast improvement for me. I've probably rambled on long enough now, because I need to go and do it again now to kind of process exactly what's going on. So I will try and make a few more circuits around, get some exercise, try and get a good night's sleep, and see if I can do it. Well, I'm going to spend a week or so, I think, doing it, when it's dark, because again, less input, less people around, less traffic, so it's not going to bother me as much, and I shouldn't sort of set myself up to fail. I've achieved a success. Now I need to reinforce that success, and hopefully I will do that for a while. And then it will be time to do something like go into a shop and buy something, which is another problem of mine. Just what I used to do when I was anxious is just stand there with the money in my hand, obsessively counting the money, so I had exactly the right amount, so I could just sort of dump it there, take what I want, and run out. So now I need to sort of work at that level, and crossing a road is another thing for me, because I've gone around the block but I haven't really crossed the road. So maybe this time what I'll do is I'll cross the road and I'll try and take the outer way around, so I have to cross a few roads to get the practice. But I don't want to push myself too much, because if I suddenly trigger myself, then all of tonight's success will be lost. At the same time, I don't want to be so anxious driven or anxiety driven again, that I don't push myself and I don't expand myself, because otherwise I'm going to go back to feeling like I was, which is failure. And it's failure, it's this constant failure, the fact that you're constantly failing at this thing that everyone else does very easily, that caused me these problems for so long. So now that I'm starting to understand this, I need to reinforce it. I need to get myself out there more, and I need to practice. So anyway, I've been talking long enough. My mouth is dry. I'm going to have a drink. Then I'm going to try and get around the block another couple of times. So thank you for watching. For everyone who managed to get through to the end of this, thanks a lot. Ta-ra.